Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, I will call the April 9th, 2025 Select Board meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. We don't have any changes to the agenda. I do want to confirm we have two members online tonight. Malcolm, can you hear us?
Yes.
And Dawn?
Yes.
Okay, we can hear you as well. Announcement, so all votes will be taken by roll call this evening. Announcements, Libby?
Thank you. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. The Town Council Study Committee is inviting citizens and residents to upcoming public sessions to explore a potential transition to a town council form of government. And these sessions are coming up on April 10th, 12th, and 14th. And more information can be found on the town website and as shown on the Select Board's meeting agenda. We also have an open house coming up on April 19th for people interested in learning about the case for a new Department of Public Works facility. And there's a lot of information about this project online. Again, that website is on the agenda. There are tours available at Our Island Home, and our operations administrator there, Michelle Monroe, is available to give tours and answer any questions people might have about that project. And that information is also on the Select Board agenda. And that's it for announcements.
Okay, any Select Board comments or announcements? Nobody? Okay. I'm going to read the public comment responses to public comment questions from last week. Rebecca Duhame asked, what is the town's plan to implement the will of the voters as expressed in approval of Article 60 at the 2024 annual town meeting and Article 5 at the 2024 special town meeting? Specifically, how will the short-term rental registration process be amended to deny permits to investors or corporate entities? And the response is all short-term rental applications are reviewed and approved by the Health and Human Service Department administrative staff. Number two, the number of asked about the number of properties the town identified as possible short-term rentals and initiated, please register your short-term rental letter to property owners or managers starting from the program launch in 2024 to present. And the response is in 2024, the town sent over 900 letters to property owners of potential short-term rental properties on Nantucket, encouraging them to register. No letters have been sent in 2025 to date. She also asked the number of short-term rental permits issued by the Health Department, and as of April 4th, 2025, there were 1,058 permits issued. Number four, other facts that have been gleaned from the short-term rental permit application process that the town has previously released to any individual or organization based on Freedom of Information Act requests or other discussions. And the response is, as a result of a public records request submitted under the Massachusetts Public Records Law, the town of Nantucket released a list of properties holding short-term rental permits. The released information included street name, city, and zip code associated with each registered property. George Ellis asked how the proposed new Our Island Home will affect room and board rates for patients who are Nantucket seniors, and how are they compared to our current rates? And the response is on March 12th, 2025, Our Island Home Management presented a rate proposal to the Select Board. That proposal recommended a rate increase effective July 1st, 2025, along with the annual rate increases in line with annual Social Security cost of living increases. This has been standard practice in the past and remains the aspirational goal of Our Island Home Management. However, it is not a guarantee. Our Island Home had not increased its rates since 2018 until that date. We voted in March. Number two, what are the projections for the town's annual financial support for the new operating budget deficits compared to the current home? As shared with the Select Board at its December 18th meeting, we expect the current operating override to be sufficient to support the operations in the current OIH and in the proposed new OIH over a 5-year horizon. Clifford Williams asked, what is the method used to purchase affordable housing? And the response is the Affordable Housing Trust utilizes several methods to acquire or support affordable housing. These include direct property purchases, funding grants with housing organizations, and public-private partnerships. All acquisitions adhere to public procurement laws and are guided by the Affordable Housing Trust mission to create year-round affordable and attainable housing opportunities. The guidelines for evaluating properties When considering property acquisitions, the Affordable Housing Trust follows a set of key evaluation criteria, which include suitability for year-round affordable or attainable housing, zoning and potential for development or redevelopment, proximity to transportation, jobs, and services, cost and financial feasibility, community impact and alignment with the town's strategic housing goals, readiness of the site, including infrastructure, permitting, environmental factors. And Clifford also asked, what is the appropriate contact to engage in affordable housing? And the town response was individuals or organizations interested in learning more or participating in affordable housing initiatives are encouraged to contact the housing director, Christy Ferrantella, or email housing@nantucket-ma.gov for more information. Residents may also visit the town's dedicated website to housing. There's a link to that online in the answers to public comment questions. Mary Chalk asked about the debris that could potentially get to Nantucket from the drilling, and that she was referring to the offshore drilling or exploration for a water source. And the town's response is the town of Nantucket has submitted formal comments to the National Science Foundation Division of Ocean Sciences regarding the draft environmental assessment for the proposed IODP/NSF Expedition 501 in the Atlantic Ocean south of Nantucket. A copy of the letter can be viewed, and there's a link. In addition, the town has invited representatives from the University of Massachusetts, Colorado School of Mines, NSF, and the British Geological Survey, BGS, to attend an upcoming select board meeting to provide information and respond to public concerns. Barbara Burgo.
Hang on one second. And
Yep.
also under that, there's a whole bunch of information in our packet that the
Yep.
staff reached out and it was provided to us. So it's in our packet. So anyone that wants to learn about it can go there.
Thanks, Matt. Barbara Burgo asked when the work group would start meeting. The town responses, and that is the procurement work group for the firm to review the investigation of the African Meeting House crime. And the town response is the next work group meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 17th, 2025 at 10 a.m. And that is at 131 Pleasant Street, Room A. The Zoom link will be posted along with the agenda in the agenda and minutes section on the town's website, as will all meetings for that group. Campbell Sutton has asked, has someone thought about investigating zoning related to short-term rental regulation, noting the tension between primary and accessory use? And the town response is the community has been working for several years to find an acceptable compromise on this issue. Many efforts have been made to bridge the gap between groups with differing views. Ultimately, the responsibility for making a decision rests with the town meeting. Amy Eldridge asked, can someone better explain the definition of a year-round resident? The terminology in some of the articles is confusion between residency and year-round resident. The town's response is zoning versus legal residency. Zoning bylaws on Nantucket and generally in Massachusetts do not currently define the term, quote, year-round resident, nor is there a proposed definition for the broader term, quote, and unquote, resident in this context. What is proposed in Article 47 is a new zoning term, year-round housing. As proposed in Article 47, the term year-round housing is defined as, quote, housing that serves as the principal residence of the occupants for at least 10 months per year, whether owner-occupied or rented, unquote. This language is based on Section 32 of Chapter 150 of the Acts of 2024, also known as the Affordable Homes Act, and is consistent with the Affordable Housing Trust's existing practices. Its focus on how it it is focused on how a property is used rather than the legal residency status of the occupant. Legal residency used for voting, taxation, or state benefits is defined and determined by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, not by zoning bylaws. And there is a link to find more information on the public comment response webpage. So now we will go on to public comment for this evening. So this is public comment for items not on the agenda. And I have one hand up online. Erica, if you could, I have two hands up online, so I'm going to go back and forth. So we'll do Rebecca Duhame first, and Erica, if I'll remind you to do the timer too. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the extensive research on the questions I posed at the last meeting. I do appreciate that. I have a follow-up question because I think I need further clarification on the answer that was given to my first question last week. So specifically, what I was asking about is whether the short-term rental permit application process was going to be modified to query the applicant to provide documentation that if the applicant for a permit is an LLC trust or S Corp, that they would need to prove that every shareholder, partner, or member of the legal entity is a natural person as established by documentation provided by the applicant at the time of the registration. This is as Town Code Chapter 123, subparagraph 3-H was modified based on the 2024 annual town meeting and special town meeting. So I guess what I was hoping to elicit was whether the actual permit application was going to be changed so that applicants would have to provide this documentation and not unduly burden the health department to try to figure out which applicants who might be LLCs were, for instance, were owned by natural persons or might be owned by investor-owned entities and therefore ineligible for permits. So perhaps that can be answered in the future. Again, as I mentioned last time, one of my concerns is that the health department not be unduly burdened. So I think the burden for this should go back to the permit applicants. And I think that's also the will, but it is the will of the voters as expressed last year in the meetings to actually keep these non-natural person legal entities from obtaining short-term rental permits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that follow-up. Caroline?
Thank you, Caroline Balzer.
Caroline, hang on one sec. We'll give reset. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I have two questions. I couldn't hear the last speaker all that well, but I think mine might be somewhat related. The article sponsors, I'm article sponsor for 66, and the other three article sponsors for STR, they all reference the lever of getting rid of corporate-owned and investor-owned. And it is my understanding that we already voted for those things in Perrin's article and in Article 60. And yet, when I'm talking to voters about my article, they are saying, I don't want to vote for your article because it's the other ones that get rid of corporate-owned and investor-owned. And I didn't put that into my article because I was using the current town code, and it appears that the other sponsors might have been referencing the prior town code since it hadn't been updated at the time the articles were due. So I am wondering what, in the hopes for clarity ahead of town meeting this year, what advice would there be for how to get that information out to voters? Because waiting till town meeting is going to be very confusing. So that's the first. The second one is having just seen that somebody FOIA'd the list of current properties on the new town local registry. That was a bit concerning. Can one, given that there's a new lawsuit fomenting for SDRs, is there a way for somebody to request who FOIA'd that, and is that available to everybody? I think that needs to be clarified, because we still are dealing with the lawsuits. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. I'm going to go to Veronica Bonet online.
Hello. I am just calling, wanting to make a comment because I see you're meeting again on the Vineyard Wind blade break and potential litigation tomorrow. I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that, one, the environmental study that was ordered by the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, for which a plan was due on October 11th, was never approved by the BSEE and therefore has not commenced. I learned that through a Freedom of Information Act request. And the other thing I wanted to make sure you knew, which I learned through a separate FOIA request, is that the root cause analysis that was supposed to be conducted independently by the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement is not complete. And I think that both of those things are important because regardless of that work not being either initiated in the case of the environmental study or completed in the case of the root cause analysis, the project got approval to resume full blade construction and the removing of these 60-something blades and putting them back on. And I haven't seen that the select board has been vocal about that ruling that happened on January 17th. I haven't seen any communication anywhere from the select board to any government agency or state agency on that. So that was it. Oh, and one other thing. I did send you guys a bunch of information on the hydrology study, and I probably won't be here for that portion of the meeting, but when people submit things to the select board, it would be nice just to get a quick response to say, yes, we have received this, so that the person submitting it at least knows you've gotten their information that they sent to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Cliff? Yep.
Cliff Williams, thank you.
Cliff,
And,
just
thanks for those
Cliff,
answers.
Cliff, just hang on one second.
Can't hear me?
Okay. No, I wait for Erica to reset the timer, so it takes us a couple of seconds. Sorry.
Is that my timer up there?
Yeah.
You just lost 8 seconds.
I know, I'm quick though.
Nope, we're going to make sure you get them back.
When I'm like trying to take someone off talking online, it just takes me.
Yeah.
This is like the basketball tournament.
I know, I could win though.
Okay. Okay. You're on.
Nice. Thanks for the answers from last week or the week before. I was really looking for some particular numbers like square footage prices. I know we're up to like $1 million per apartment down the street for the project Billy Cassidy's been doing. And I know that we're trying to buy a piece of land off of Gray and Street or Road, whatever it is. But anyway, I was really looking for some square footage prices, some real numbers, almost like a balance sheet you'd give as a business, because I know we're going to town meeting. I know Mr. Brown's got an article in to rescind the $6 million because a lot of people really wanted to see more results as far as houses versus just land purchases. And maybe we can get a real, I guess, master. I saw your master plan, but it's, again, very general. So I think for the benefit of the affordable housing to go forward with the town, maybe we could show some real numbers on what the projections are for houses on the land, and just real solid numbers versus just we're doing it and we want to benefit affordable housing. I mean, we can all say that, obviously. So I know what I've done in the past for numbers, and I know the studies we'd have to have, but I didn't see any study on the piece of property down the street that we want to purchase for 6.5. So just, I think we should put together a balance sheet of real numbers and a real philosophy of how we do things that we can show at town meeting. So when people ask, what are we doing? What are we producing? What's the cost compared to what we've done so far and what we're going to do in the future? Things like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Cliff. Curtis?
Hi, my name is Meredith Moldenhauer. I'm a proud Nantucket homeowner in Sconset and also a board member of the Sconset Beach Preservation Fund. Erosion is a critical issue affecting the island, and Sconset Beach Preservation Fund has dedicated years to developing a long-term approach to help protect and strengthen environmentally appropriate coastal infrastructure. We are pleased to be working with the town Natural Resources staff member Vince Murphy, and know that this morning a sand nourishment plan was submitted to the town as required under condition 52 of the new Conservation Commission approved order. We hope to have an opportunity to discuss the sand plan, which we believe is balanced compliance, also with learned data at next week's select board meeting prior to town meeting in order to move forward on this path as partners. This iterative process is necessary to complete this important coastal resiliency project. I am pleased to express our gratitude to you as the select board as our partner, and to the Conservation Commission for a comprehensive hearing process and a thorough order that was approving this vibrant and viable environmental path forward to addressing the resiliency for our planning that will protect nearby beaches, roads, homes, historic paths, and the lighthouse. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Meredith. Mary? Give Erica a second. Okay. Go ahead.
Mary Chalk. Last month, the INM gave the public false information about this drilling project off the South Shore. They quoted the co-chief scientist, Brandon Dugan, as saying, we received all necessary permits from the Federal Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Environmental Protection Agency, verifying the operation poses no significant environmental hazard. That seemed really out of order for me, so I suggested in that article, contacted the science manager for the project, David McInroy, and 2 days ago he replied, "Dear Mary, thank you for your inquiry, and I would be happy to assist. Our project has received some of the necessary approvals, but not yet from the Army Corps of Engineers. This is currently in progress." I believe that Army Corps of Engineer permit is the final permit. So the public, since the public was misled about the approval process, can you ask for an extension of the comment period? Because it runs out in 2 days, as is. And what channels of communication will you use to alert the public about this? And there's going to be, sounds like an incredible amount of mud discharge from the drillings, like a half a football field cube per week. And some will fall to the floor of the sea, but some will be carried away by currents, possibly to our beaches. So will the town be, my question is, will the town be monitoring water quality this summer on the South Shore for the entire summer of this project? And my last question is, Arcadis promised a follow-up on the environmental impact from the summer blade fiberglass pollution. They promised a more thorough analysis after their preliminary report, which just used models. So could you please provide an update on that? And also the Natural Resource Department was taking weekly water samples for testing after the blade break. And so what are the results of that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Sorry, just taking notes, make sure we don't miss anything. Okay, any other public comments? You ready, Erica? Okay.
Ready?
Go ahead, Brooke.
Brooke Gibbs. I just want to let you guys know that Jim Barros and I are going to take a trip to Washington DC on the 21st of May, after the election, to resolve this if it doesn't get resolved by then. Okay? I'm not going to get off into all of these new regulations or these entitlements that the board has to curtail our speaking in public speech and all this, all these, there's no constructive reason to spend 3 minutes up here trying to talk to you guys if we're not ever going to have a conversation beyond 3 minutes. really. We need to have a session where we get to all have an open conversation about these things instead of 3 minutes. It's foolishness. What does that accomplish? If I have 10 people that want me to speak for them about an issue, why is it that I can't speak for a half hour about it? If I have a solution to something that's really elaborate, that's far beyond a 3-minute explanation, why can't I speak for 30 minutes? And this is just leaving you, me, and everyone involved open to being sued. The authorities and purpose, if you look back here at procedures at number 4, it says that people aren't allowed to let other people use their time. And I have to give you 2 days notice if I have a special accommodation I need. And the problem isn't that we can't communicate, it's that we're not given the opportunity to communicate any other time but now. And the town constantly just shuts off what they don't want to hear, listens to it, writes it down, and maybe it happens someday. And I've looked on the town website, and your strategic plan is from 2018. It's 7 years old, and none of the stuff on it is even really done. It's all just research. So it's like I have answers to these things, and I have positive input to what you're trying to accomplish. And nobody listens. It's like you're too good to listen. It's like you've got all the answers. It's like you've had all the answers for 30 years. And we just, quality of life goes through the floor. Addiction, everybody's depressed, everybody's drinking, everybody's trying to survive. Economics is like going through the ceiling. And you guys, how are we gonna survive blue collar people with house prices being 2.4 million? That's 14,000 a month for just the price of the house. So we need to talk about bigger things, and we need to not curtail everybody by a 30-second clock, because there are answers to these things that some people don't want to hear, and it just needs to happen. We need to stop playing like pretending it doesn't exist. Okay? I'm not trying to cause disruption like page 4. I'm not trying to like just come in here and barrel you guys every week. But when this guy hasn't gotten any justice in 7 years, and we all know what the story is, why can't we do something about it today, and we have to wait 2 more weeks to get it done, or even talk about it? Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke. Okay, anybody else? Public comment? Not seeing any hands raised online. Okay, we will close public comment. We don't have any new business. Next up is approval of minutes, treasury warrants, and pending contracts. Any questions, comments, or a motion from the board?
Yeah, I'll move approval.
Okay, all three?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Do I have a
Second.
Okay, by roll call, Matt?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Those are approved. Next up is Health Department overview of proposed draft Board of Health regulation amendments. So just as a point of clarification, when another regulatory board proposes changes to their regulations, we generally have them presented through the select board so that folks who watch the board get a heads up. We do not have any approval authority over this. This is informational for the board and the community. So Libby, who's?
Hi, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. Go ahead.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. John Hedden, Chief Environmental Health Officer with Health and Human Services for the town of Nantucket. I'm here to give an update on Board of Health Regulation, Chapter 223, Board of Health Administration, Article 3, which is the definition section. This definition section is formally known as Regulation 50. It was originally adopted in 2004. It was last amended in 2015. The definitions are a supplement to the definitions in Title V, which is State Environmental Code for on-site sewage disposal systems. These definitions define many of the terms that you'll find in our local Board of Health septic system regulations. As time evolves and regulations change, updates are necessary, and these changes are to help provide clarity to terms found in the septic system regulations. The board has added some language to the definition of a bedroom to help keep building floor plan, room counts, and required sizing of septic systems more consistent. There's also some language added to the definition of new construction to convey when a septic system is required to be upgraded to current standards due to new construction.
John, hang on one second. I think Erica's going to put it up and maybe scroll down through. Would that be
Oh.
helpful for
Sure, sure, yeah. It's
now that we're partway through? I don't know if your presentation sort of goes in order of the regulations at all, or just for the public's information, this is available in our packet.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I'm here for a general update on everything that's in here. One being, as you can see, many other things are already crossed out, so I'll get into that in a second there. But yeah, they're alphabetical order there, so anyone that wants to follow along can. But this is a brief update of everything.
Okay, thanks, John. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So several of the definitions from other regulations that the Board of Health has were incorporated into this one definition section to help kind of consolidate things. A lot of the definitions found in Title V were removed from this regulation to further consolidate things. And those are all the those crossed out items that you see. So we've worked through this a little bit, so you'll see some of the red language from this one actually has some crossed out things, and that was based on comments that we received. And the goal of this was really to try and clarify a few of the terms that are found in the local septic system regulations, and just try and consolidate things. There'll probably be a few more septic system local regulation updates coming, I would say in the next maybe year or two, based on different amendments that have been made to Title V in July of 2023. So that's the update. It's just an update to all the definitions and different terms you'll see in the current Board of Health septic system regulations. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Matt has a question.
Yeah, John, why remove the coastal bank definitions? How did that help clarify or clean up? What was the reasoning for that?
Yeah, so good question. The feedback I received from that is that often these wetland definitions change. So it's best just to keep it consistent with how we put it in there. Gets towards the end here that it's as they're defined in wetland regulations, by the state, and also our local definitions through natural resources. So yeah, we were advised that was the better way to go on this. So
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions? Anybody here wanting to ask questions about this? Okay. All right, thanks for the update, and a reminder to the public that all the red line changes are available in our packet online, if anyone's curious. Okay, next up, Town Manager's Report, proposed new Our Island Home Facility update. Libby?
So we have our team here, Craig Piper of SMRT, our designer and architect for the project, John Lemieux, our owner's project manager of Vertex. I don't know if Bob is online. Bob Eisenstein is our operational consultant for Island Home Operations, but Michelle Monroe is here, our operations administrator. Jack Dankert, our contractor from Consigli, and that's it. Is that it? Yeah.
Rick.
And Rick, of course, is critical to the entire project, assistant town manager. And they've been meeting all week about the project and some news about the bids that have been very recently opened, which is why we scheduled this item on your agenda tonight to update you on that. And I think we've got some information from the finance director too. Brian also is on the team as well. And of course, Don.
Okay, thank you. Again, Craig Piper from SMRT. I was going to give a brief update on what has happened since we met last in December. One of the big milestones was the permitting effort. We have planning board approval, we have HDC approval. We're almost through our public health approval process. There's 2 steps. There's a determination of need, and we are imminently, should hear word on that. And then there's a process for the plan review. We're halfway through that, and we had hoped to have everything wrapped up before town meeting, but we may be just on the other side of town meeting, but we're really close on all our permitting approvals. Next step, our slide, please. Many have heard that there's been a number of public information meetings. As you can see, we're here at the select board, kind of a little over halfway through our updates. We've had really good attendance and some great questions throughout the process. And questions that have come up have been addressed through the town's website on the project and frequently asked questions. So any of the new questions that have come up, we've answered on the website. So there's a wealth of information and background to be seen. So next slide. Again, where we are in the big picture, we have a big milestone today is to bring our final construction budgets and today, and then I believe tomorrow is an update with Finance Committee. As you know, ATM is coming up in town election. If the project is successful, the plan is to start construction in September and open in December of 2027. So with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, John. I think next slide, yes.
Okay, so just again, John Lemieux from Vertex, Owner's Project Manager. Take you through the bidding process. This is the first time Nantucket has used the construction manager at risk delivery method. The biggest difference between it and how you've done all your other public projects is all your other public projects, you didn't know what the bid was until bid day. Or I should say, in a majority of your projects, you went and approved monies and then hoped that when the bids were opened, we were within budget. The approach with this CM at risk and with the way the project team planned this was to be able to have a bid, bring it to everybody and say, this is the bid. So when we talk about the budget in a second, we know what Consigli's number is. We're not guessing anymore. We're not estimating anymore. We've gone out to the marketplace and the marketplace has come back and the numbers I'll discuss in a second. Just by way of backup, there were approximately 33 different categories of work that were bid. We originally, and they called trade bids and non-trade bids, the 14 trade bid categories were advertised first. We received a total of only 29 bids for those 14 categories. Some of those categories we got 0 or we got 1. So what we really realized really quickly that we had to do was, because we're using CM at risk, the Commonwealth gives us the opportunity to go back out and reject those trade bids and tell Consigli, go and pursue these as a non-trade, because basically we either had no bid or the bids that we had were extremely high. In the case of the plumber and HVAC, we had one bidder. That one bidder, their 2 bids combined were almost $7 million over budget for that one bid. So we said, can't do this.
John, could you explain the difference between trade and non-trade? Just define them for us,
Sure.
please.
For anybody that remembers any of the other public projects you've done, you've heard the term GC and filed subbid, right? Filed subbid or trade bidders, depending on which delivery method you're using, are really just the specific work categories that the Commonwealth defines as specific subcategories of work. HVAC, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, painting. It's, I think, a total of 21, Jack, or 22 categories total. You only utilized 14 of them, like one of them's terrazzo. You didn't have any terrazzo, so we didn't bid that. The non-trade is everything else. Structural steel is a non-trade, site work is a non-trade, landscaping's a non-trade. So there's really, why did the Commonwealth say these particular things are trade bidders? It's in MGL 149 and 149A. It's just the list that's out there. The big difference is when it's a trade bid, you're bidding plans and specs and the number's the number, right? When it's a non-trade bid, we have the ability, as we will with Consigli, to actually see the bids and look at the qualifications and assumptions that each of those subs said, I'm going to carry this and not carry that. And that makes sure that we have, we level those, make sure Consigli has leveled those bids. So when they say, Nantucket, you should use firm A because they have this price and this scope, we're comfortable with that, right? To make sure that in the end, Nantucket is buying a complete project. Did that answer the question? Okay, great. So we had the 29 trade bids. We rejected the 8 of those categories and went back out as non-trade. Those 8 trades that we rejected had 9 bids associated with them. Again, some were 0, some were 1. One of them was 2 bids. In the end, that was able to increase to 26 bids, so that was a great result. We also received 64 other non-trade bids on the 19 other categories, making a total of 119 sub-bids were received across 33 categories of work. So when we talk about the cost in just a second, understand that we did ultimately get a really good return from the marketplace and a lot of numbers to compare to each other within the trades, so that, while we might not be happy with the number, you can feel that the number is a good number because you've got multiple data points within the same subsets. And it's important to know that the guaranteed maximum price submittal that we got from Consigli basically used the responsive and responsible bidder. Those are the trades, those are the terms that we use to say this person got the bid, they returned it on time, and it included all of the things that we needed to call it a bid that we can use with faith in the putting together of our GMP. Next slide, please. So the number, it went up, and we're going to talk about why it went up in a second. But just for the sake of everybody in the breakdown, basically I grouped this. Actually, is there a slide missing here? Okay, all right, let's stop there for a second. We'll go the why first, and then we'll go back to the actual number. I have it slightly different order. So what's the difference here? Well, understand that the difference when we came to you last time in December, we were at design development. The design was at probably roughly 60% complete. The design hasn't changed, it's just been moved forward. So what changed to help increase the cost? Well, the first item there is scope. Basically, you learn more about the job. As the design was progressing, we got more information in from the geotechnical engineer. The geotech engineer said, well, you know what? We're going to have to replace some of the soils in the footprint of the building, dig them out to about 4 feet and replace it with more earth. We're also going to need more geothermal wells, because the conductivity of those wells, basically how the temperature of those wells and how well or not well temperature moves and recharges in those, we need a few more. Those resulted in an increase of a couple $2 million. The next one is one you've been hearing all about in the news for the last few weeks. We had to increase the price of the project by $4.5 million for tariffs. And to be clear, we're carrying that as an allowance. If the tariffs don't happen, Nantucket doesn't spend, we don't spend it, Nantucket doesn't spend it, it's, it would be money that you wouldn't ultimately need. We also had a great collaborative process with the HDC, but ultimately the timing was such that when we finally got the final list of comments, Consigli was unable to be able to final price those, so we carried an allowance as well. So that was $800,000. And then overall, market conditions were just different. That the remaining $6 million was really spread out across the majority of the numbers. Some were higher than estimate, some were lower, but overall, a good number of them were higher. And as I relayed a few minutes ago, these aren't estimates anymore, these are actual bid figures. Between now and town meeting, we will continue the process with Consigli, assuming that there are going to be favorable votes both at town meeting and at the ballot, so that post-ballot, we're ready to sign the contract with them. So what we're doing is making sure that, as we go through and look at all of those trade bids, making sure that the allowances and those kind of things that are being carried aren't too conservative, shake it out. So at the end, we talked as a group yesterday, you know, if we were able to save, you know, or find another $1 million plus in there, we would come back and change that number, you know, and let you all know. If it were less than that, you know, maybe we don't change the number, we just keep it as, you know, the project where it is, and it adds to the contingency. Bottom line is the work doesn't stop between now and getting to town meeting. And then probably most important is to realize that the budget includes, as I said, $4.5 million in tariff contingency, but also as a rule, we would typically on a new job carry 5% contingency for just in case monies, which in this project is $5.5 million. So you take the 5.5, add the 4.5, we're at 10. All of that is contingency. It's your money. We guard it as if it's your money. It's not part of Consigli's contract, but we have it in case we need to use it. You know, along the way, if we hit a unexpected buried obstruction, you need a pool of money to be able to take that from, okay, and deal with it that way. So,
Yeah, quick question. What if the tariff wars, what if they escalate and the 20% tariff, you know, 10%, 20% estimate becomes 40%?
No, it's a great question. So basically, what we've seen in the marketplace right now is the information that was out there, the countries that were out there. It's a great question, right? You know, 25% on steel from Canada, right? What we were looking at that is it's 25 on the material, as an example. Well, when you look at an item, maybe steel is 60% material and 40% labor, or something you could argue either way. In the end, we had been carrying, okay, if the steel thing happens from the beginning, that equated on an average job to 1%. If you start going through with China, other wood products, cedar shingles, those sorts of things, we're at about 5% right now is what we're carrying, and that's based on what we heard. Could it get worse? If it got worse, we would need the contingency, right? If it's less, it's less. I mean, I think we're all hopeful that we do see some reduction there. You know, also too, you know, we've got some other, when I talk about the other allowances within the, you know, within the GMP, those things also become a source of potential, some extra funding here and there. Just so folks understand, as an example, when we move the houses down to the wastewater treatment plant, until we split the house to move it, we don't quite know what the scope of the electrician's going to be to put it back together. So the electricians in this case didn't have a set of plans to bid, so they carried an allowance. Maybe we carry, you know, in the allowance, let's say it was 200 grand between the two houses. Well, maybe we only need 100, but once that happens, that stuff falls out to the bottom. And remember, we're moving the houses first, building the houses second, and then starting to build the facility, right? So, building the houses first, moving second, and then building the facility. So we're going to have checkpoints along the way. So, you know, Consigli will buy out as much of the job as they can, as early as they can, so that you can lock in prices, lock in delivery, lock in tariffs as well, to the extent that we have them.
So if I did your math right, the tariffs would have to double or triple for it to be over?
Tariffs would have to double to be over.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, to be over the monies we have.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then next slide, I think there was another slide. So these were the numbers. You can see the building is really just as it says, just for the building. Then we have the numbers that we've grouped into the housing group. We've got the relocation of the Sherburne Commons buildings to the wastewater treatment plant. We've got the put options on Sherburne Commons units 5 and 6 for purchase. We've got the new Sherburne Commons housing. The housing numbers equate to $13.5 million. It's important to realize that line items 2 and 4, there's an intrinsic value to the town of Nantucket for the housing that you're gaining for that. That's hard to put into this equation, but in the end, you will be gaining housing as part of it. This project is taking the hit, but the reality is you'll have a number of bedrooms, not quite sure on the total, that will be available once this housing happens. Next item is your designer, your OPM, and your other owner's costs. As an example, one of the other, designer, SMRT, OPM, Vertex, other owner's cost, it has to do with third-party testing, builder's risk insurance, which we didn't have Consigli carry. The town is going to buy that themselves. That's your property insurance for what happens to the building as you pay for it as it goes up. If God forbid there was a fire. It's not inexpensive. That policy is going to be around $1.5 million for a building of this size. Medical equipment, FF&E and technology, that's $3 million. That's everything. If you pick up the building and shook it, that would fall out. There's still some medical equipment that is part of Consigli's scope, as in the patient lifts, that are really integral and built into the room. So they carried those things. So people might look at this and say, well, wait a minute, that's not a lot for equipment for a building of this type. That's because some of it is in Consigli's number. There's our 2 contingencies we talked about, which total just over $10 million. We've got the Sherburne Commons site allowance for the site of $6 million. Total project budget, $134, minus the $8.5 that was already appropriated to Article 11 of the 2022 annual town meeting, leaves us at, for this Article 13 for the 2025 town meeting, 125.9. And I'll stop there for any questions. I know that's before. Brian will come up and talk about funding, what he's looking at for funding options.
Okay. Tom?
John, thank you. Quick question, just maybe for the publics, so everyone's aware. I know we did this last year, but would you describe Owner's Project Manager and CM at Risk and how that works and why we chose it, just in kind of high-level terms? Just
Sure.
So we're level setting here.
No, great question. So, as an example, you use the CM because of the collaborative nature of this, right? The work that happened when we opened those first trade bids, and we were $7 million over on 2 envelopes, okay? In the end, if we had done GC, there would have been no going back at that point. All you would have been able to do is issue addenda and change the design. There would have been no reaching out to Consigli to say, hey, we only got 9 bids in these 8 categories, right? We would have been forced to re-advertise, probably still get no bids, and then assign the work to the GC. What would have happened there is, because of the timing, there's a likelihood we would have gotten a bid from the GC, but with a caveat with allowances that we would have had to reconcile probably post-town meeting. Again, angst about the contingency and kind of, where that is. You would have lost the ability. One of the great features of the building is that Consigli is building would be building all of the bathrooms across the water, on the mainland, and shipping them over as pods. So basically, the buildings come over, all 45 of them, and put them in place, and they're largely constructed, saving the town the prevailing wage of building those on site. Can't do that with a GC. This is all work that's kind of pre-design work, kind of working hand in hand with the architect. So it's really for the collaborative relationship and for the pricing information and the ability to do that. As your owner's project manager in the Commonwealth of Mass, any public project over $1.5 million requires that you have an owner's project manager to help with the procurement of the designer, which we're here for that, as well as the procurement of the builder. The town chose to do the CM at Risk for the first time. That's there. And then during construction, we're there as the eyes and ears of the project, throughout the rest. SMRT doesn't go away, but in reality, as we move to construction, they'll be here less. We'll be here more, watching as this thing gets constructed.
Thank you. Anybody else? Questions? No? Matt? Brooke, did you want to ask a question?
What was the budget projection, or what was your budgeted amount for plumbing?
We can get that. Do you have that?
And
From the actual GMP?
Yeah.
You just submitted?
yes.
Yeah.
Jack Dankert with Consigli Construction. The plumbing budget was 4.2 million.
Wait, Brooke, let's try to manage how we do this, because the public can't hear you when you're not in front of a microphone. So did you have a follow-up question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm an out-of-state licensed master plumber, okay? And I would like to do the job for cost plus living expenses for myself. And I can do that job myself in 1.5 years, okay? I can. I've done the hotels, 56 rooms by myself, okay? I can get the people to do the work as necessary. I would like to contribute my capacity to the project to reduce the cost. If it's 4 million and they're only bidding at 11, then I would like to put myself in to contribute to completing the project for as little money as possible in the plumbing aspect, because I have the license to do so. It's out of state, and I can't get my license here, so I don't know if there's any legal issues with it, but I would like to volunteer myself to do whatever I can to make the price go down.
Okay, I'm going to, thank you.
And I don't know, I'm just asking them, is that a possibility?
Well, so what I'm going to do is ask the Chief Procurement Officer to explain. Can you do that? Or who can answer
It's
the
okay,
procurement question about somewhat how this has to happen, that why it would not be feasible for a member of the community to offer to do work in this way through the bidding process? Can you sort of
Right.
help
So
explain that?
when we made the plumbing non-trade, it did open the project up a little bit. What I would say, though, is with Consigli as the builder, they would need to pass whatever Consigli's requirements are. At the end of the day, if there's a problem, the buck stops first with Consigli as your builder, right? And the requirements they have for all of the sub-trades that they have, the insurance requirements that they have, the licensing requirements that they have. Corporately, they may require that there be a Massachusetts licensed plumber doing a Massachusetts project, should the state building inspector come by to take a look. So it's something we could certainly ask some more questions on, but not something I think we are prepared to give a complete answer to tonight.
That helps explain the process. Brooke, I'm not going to
just
go back
one-
and forth
one
on this.
clarification for what he just said. I'm not trying to draw this out, but there are plenty of projects on the island that have been done by out-of-state plumbing
Okay,
contractors.
we're not going to have a dialogue about this right now. You've asked a question, we'll try to get you an
Well, I'm trying to
answer.
get, right, that's what I'm asking.
He just said he's not prepared to
I
answer.
think I think we can put our heads together and come back and provide you with
I think that's what I
with some
heard.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great.
Great.
Okay, anybody else? Howard?
Of course.
I noticed that in the project cost summary, you recharacterized 4.4 million of your $10 million contingency for the use of the tariff to cover the new tariff. I'm wondering if you have if you have 5.6 million really now as a contingency at this point in the project. Based on your experience in projects like this, what is the typical
Howard, you need to
percentage?
speak into the mic.
What's the typical
Thanks.
percentage of contingency on total project cost? Is the $5 million enough?
Great question. What I would tell you is that on new projects, typically a 5% contingency is sufficient, and that's 5% on all of the project costs. So not just construction, but your soft costs as well, because furniture may go up as well, right? So we want to have a little buffer there, for those kind of non-construction costs. If this was a renovation, we would say 10%. Any addition or renovation project where you're touching an old building, connecting to an old building, we always suggest 10% because of the unknowns. A building that may be framed one particular way on 3 sides, and you think you know what you're going to get in that 4th side. We've all been bitten by the 4th side being completely different, not understanding what the builder was thinking at the time. So 5% for new builds, we're very comfortable, 10% as well. And I'll also say that within Consigli's GMP, guaranteed maximum price, their proposal, there is also what's called the CM contingency. It's there for them for buyout, but it's another little bucket of money that's there for them to be able to cover other pieces of the buyout and what have you. So between those 3 contingencies, I think we feel pretty confident. That third one I just mentioned is really, they need to get the approval of the owner to use it, but it's there, and it has to be part of their pricing proposal by the way the GMPs are set up. But again, any of those contingencies unused come back to Nantucket at the end.
Okay. Craig, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to add one item. The medical equipment line item for $3 million is a budget. That is not a bid. So John's point about contingency, because we're not buying that, we don't need that equipment for 2.5 years. It doesn't make sense to purchase it now. So it's waiting till last minute. So that's of all the numbers. That one line item is a budget, not a, but we have good budgets, good estimates.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Malcolm, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, I had a call today from a citizen wanting to know what a put option is. And I think I'm not qualified to explain it completely.
Rick is approaching the mic to do that. Go ahead, Rick.
So a put option gives the owner, the owner of the option has the right, but not the obligation to, in this case, sell us cottages 5 and 6. So the owner of the put option will be the residences of Sherburne Commons. The reason this is part of the numbers is because the residents of Sherburne Commons are concerned about the value of 2 cottages, the ones closest to our proposed building, becoming worth less because of their proximity to the new building. So they've requested the option to sell those to the town at a value that, at their appraised value. That appraisal will take place in the near future, hopefully before town meeting. So they have the right, but not the obligation to sell us those two cottages.
And just to be clear, if they exercise that rate, we must buy them from them.
Correct,
Yeah.
at the appraised
So
value.
it's an obligation on our side, but not theirs.
Correct.
Yep, okay. Is that, Dawn?
Yes, but the reality is that the housing would be beneficial to us probably for Island Home staff. And most likely that number will be a little bit less because the last cottage that sold there in terms of where the appraisal comes in at was just around 2.1, which would put us at more like 4.2 million rather than 4.5.
Thanks, Dawn. Howard, do you have another question?
Hi, Howard Matz. I'm on Capcom, and I'm not representing Capcom here, but when this came in front of Capcom for review, my memory's not so great, but I think the number was $90 million in the Capcom approval. But this number right now is way larger than that number, and I just hope in the future, when we look at projects like this at Capcom, that we're shown the total project cost, not just a piece of the project cost that might look a little more palatable.
If I may explain, the difference, Howard, is when it was an estimate when it came to you, and this is now the final number through.
It just looks to me like the $90 million for the building is what we were shown.
No, that's not the case.
So I stand corrected, but
Yeah.
it's, so what you're really saying is that this is, $30 to $40 million more than what we looked at.
Well, I need to look at what you saw, but I think Craig or John can say that this was, in total, when we were given a budget for this project, at the last meeting, when it was estimated, it was at 100. Okay,
The last number that was presented to this body was 112 in December. And the difference is 112 to 126 after you net out the 8.5.
okay,
Yep.
yeah, okay. So when the bidding process happened and we got final numbers, the number went up, is ultimately the difference between what we've looked at to date and what we're hearing tonight.
Correct.
Okay. Don, did you want to add anything?
Well, what I will say is that almost every bid project that I've seen in my tenure, we've had to go back for more money. So I actually hope that we use this process going forward with other projects, because having real numbers, I think, gives voters a lot more faith in the process of it not being a bid that's turns out to be incorrect once we get under construction.
Okay, anything else? You want to say thank you?
Brian
keep
has
going.
Brian has a slide.
All right, Brian's part. Brian, I almost let you off the hook.
was kind of hoping, actually, to be honest with you, but I guess not. Okay. Thanks, Erica. So as we've seen, the total project cost is $134,392,000. As John has aptly noted, the prior appropriation from Article 11 of 2022 was $8.5 million. So the additional funding that we're proposing is $125,892,000. Below is how we are proposing to solve the 125. I have talked to town administration about this proposal that's before you, and I'm happy to walk you through it. So in Article 4, the revolving fund, Public Works Housing is a revolving fund that takes all the rents received for the Hillside Apartments. We have allocated this year, and FinCom has agreed and recommended to town meeting in the Article 4 recommendation, an authorization for expenditure for $600,000. The intent was that $500,000 of that $600,000 authorization would be used to help move the cottages from Sherburne Commons to Hillside. In discussion with the town manager and town administration, I proposed to them that we allocate $1.5 million from sewer retained earnings. And the thought process behind that was that the likelihood is that this most likely would end up, the housing that would be moved to Hillside would likely end up with sewer employees in it. So with about $3.5 million in retained earnings, the recommendation was that we use some of that to offset additional costs of the project, ideally and primarily focused on the initial phase being the relocation of the cottages. Then I also proposed, if this is successful, that and we move the island home, that ideally the purchase of all the medical equipment that Craig mentioned, the $3,085,000, would typically, if we were going to be doing any medical equipment replacement in the building, would come from retained earnings from the island home itself that we had. So that was part of that recommendation of the $7,585,000. And as Select Board Member Don Holgate mentioned, that ideally and likely, if the put options were exercised by Sherburne Commons, likely that island home employees would end up going into that housing. So I've recommended and included in the retained earnings the potential that the put option could be paid for through that. That made sense in the discussion and the proposal to town administration, which would leave $116,307,502 borrowing authorization in Article 13. Now, as you remember, at the FinCom, they've already recommended a borrowing of $105. Tomorrow, we will be going before them to present this new funding plan to close the $125 in total, which that would be a request to increase the borrowing authorization by $11,307,000.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Any questions from the board?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. We have had a number of questions about whether or not the burden on the taxpayers can be reduced through a fundraising campaign. And there is a fundraising campaign that has been initiated through the Nantucket Community Foundation by the Friends of Our Island Home. However, it's not a activity that municipalities generally would be engaging in due to campaign finance restrictions and the use of taxpayer monies to raise money, if you follow. So the town isn't actively involved in a fundraising effort, although I would say we are peripherally involved as best we can be given campaign finance laws, and are providing information and assisting with the structure of ways in which funds could be donated, room names and things of that nature. So we're definitely monitoring it, and obviously the more that could potentially be fundraised, the less ultimately the taxpayers would need to pay. So again, the Community Foundation for Nantucket, the information is on this slide, and we hope that people will check it out and consider donations.
Okay, thanks, Libby. So we good? Okay, thanks, everybody. Okay, next up is 2 Fairgrounds Road parking lot. Mike, Kevin, who's going to take the lead here?
I think we've got a little team of our transportation program manager, Mike Burns, the police chief, and our project manager, Kevin Manuel. And I think, Mr. Burns, Mike Burns, are you?
I can speak to it, Libby, if you can hear me.
Oh, Kevin, you are.
Kevin's going to take it.
Yep. So good evening, everyone. As Libby said, this has been a joint effort between the Project Management Office, the town's Traffic Safety Working Group, and Public Safety. Over the last few months, there has been a lot of activity in the 2 Fairgrounds Road parking lot. And if you recall, we have had it closed since November, or the end of November of last year. That was to support several projects that were going on and needed that space, including the state DEP PFAS well investigation installation, the Wait Drive dormitory. They need staging area for their modular units. Recently, we worked on completing the reclamation of about 0.3 acres of the lot in order to ensure compliance with a MEPA impervious surface regulation in conjunction with our Tacoma Green Housing Project team. And we are at the point now where we are set to reopen this lot to the public next week on April 15th. We've been working with Florencia Rulo, our communications manager, to get the word out that the lot will be reopened for public parking, but there will be some changes in the lot. And we wanted to give an update to the board for awareness, but also let you know about what we have kind of been working on more for long-term improvements as well. So the lot will reopen on the 15th of next week. There will be some changes to the overall configuration of the lot. DPW is in the process right now of installing those improvements. If you know the lot and you've been in it in the past, you'll know that there wasn't necessarily great configuration or rhyme or reason to the traffic flow. We're trying to improve that for the parkers that will be coming into the lot, but also for the Nerda shuttle that runs their route through it. We also will be fencing off the reclaimed area that I mentioned a few moments ago in order to, in support of our MEPA impervious surface compliance. And that area will be used, well, there will be future use for that area as we further develop the lot down the road. At the same time that we'll be reopening the lot, those parkers who have been using the Surfside Road beach parking lot, in the interim, they will be asked to come back to the 2 Fairgrounds Road lot, but also notified that at that time on the 15th, the seasonal parking regulations will go back into effect, and they will have to be in compliance with those if they choose to stay there. But also there'll be new parking rules in place at 2 Fairgrounds, and enforcement will follow. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we are working on some longer term improvements to this lot. I've been working with a design engineering firm that we have on contract over the past few months to assess and survey this lot, in addition to 3 other municipal lots. And while we don't have a set target date in place yet, in the coming months, we hope to come back to leadership with some improvement or enhancement recommendations to this lot. Again, looking at improving configuration, traffic flow, safety, lighting, signage, pretty much it's all encompassing. This is really just to get the word out that the lot is reopening, but if Mike or Chief Casper has anything they can add to this about the new parking regulations, I'll allow them to take it over.
I'm not seeing either.
They're not there?
So any questions from the board?
I don't know, I think it's great that we're doing this. I look at this long-term, I think this property is too valuable to turn into parking lots. And I would hope that we would, keep this as a, sort of short-term, 10 or 20-year deal and work our transportation in a manner that doesn't require people drive, that brings the buses and things to people and doesn't require people to drive and park here. I think that, anyway, so that's just long-term, I think this property is way too valuable to use in this manner. So, thank you.
Erica?
I just wanted to make a note and a reminder that when we originally started this lot, it was for commercial vehicles because they don't have a place to park and most of them are coming from off island. So just a reminder about that.
No, I understand that. Can I respond?
Yeah.
I understand that, but I also know that if I want to park my commercial vehicle in Hyannis, it's not Hyannis government doesn't do it for me. We as a town have housing needs and we have a town building we need to move, et cetera. And so anyway, I look at it maybe slightly differently. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Matt. Chief Casper, did you want to add anything?
I don't have anything particularly to add. I mean, there's certainly been a lot of conversation about how this lot should be used. And I know there's a lot of different thoughts about it. And that's something we've been struggling with a group in our meetings on, like, what is the best use for this and what do people want us to use it for? Commercial vehicles, residential parking, day parking. It's complicated. So we're trying to do our best to balance all of that as we kind of work toward these new traffic regulations and then also talk about what the future holds for it.
And can you talk a little bit about enforcement of the regulations and the limits as we know
Sure.
them?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we're transitioning, opening the lot back open on April 15th, as Kevin mentioned. And we are not going to be doing enforcement for pay at that time, although we have all agreed that it's going to transition to a pay lot, but there's still procurement issues where we're working with finding a vendor for that, and that's something that Mike Burns is working on. So as far as that part, there won't be enforcement on the pay portion, of course, because there's no signage, and we are not doing that yet. But the other changes that were put into place will be enforced. So those involve the trailers, which you couldn't have in there before anyway, but we're still going to be on top of that. We'll be very aggressive with that early on so we don't end up with a lot of vehicles in there like that. And also the 96-hour parking limit that we put in place will also be enforcing. You may recall when we first went to empty this lot, there were about 17 trailers that were in there and then about 30-ish to 35 cars that were being long-term stored there. Long-term stored there. And I would say that, some of them for many, many months, if not even longer than that. So we really want to avoid that and keep this an active lot for all the people who want to come in and use it for all the purposes that I just discussed. So those will be the things that we're enforcing. As far as also, in addition, oversized commercial vehicles also can't be in there. So there'll be good signage up for that. That'll be very clear that what the restrictions are in the lot and that we'll be enforcing. We'll have our CSOs joining us pretty soon for the summer season. So we're thankful to have them here. And we'll have a CSO who will be working on parking enforcement in there.
Okay, thanks, Jody.
You're welcome.
Meg Rulli has her hand up. Online.
Hi, good evening. I just was wondering how many actual parking spots are available at 2 Fairgrounds Road?
Okay. Does anyone have an answer to that?
So when we did the site survey with our firm, it was hard to get an actual count because it's a gravel surface, so we can't stripe the lot and have accurate parking counts. With the survey that was done, I think we estimated close to 200 to 210, but that's for smaller vehicles. As Chief Casper said, prior to closing it, there were significantly large trailers, trucks that were left in the lot. So it's hard to get an accurate count of that.
Okay, so that's a rough idea for passenger vehicle size, maybe.
Correct.
Kevin?
And can I ask one other question?
Sure, go ahead, Meg.
How can the public be included or communicated to as far as some of the improvements you mentioned? I'm specifically thinking about lighting, things of that nature, because I'm in a butter, and when lights start going up, it's, it can be not so great at night. There's benefits, I know, for safety to have it, but also to protect people from it being too bright. So how can the public get involved or be notified of some of the changes you're talking about? Is there a hearing or a committee that we should be following?
So if I can respond to that, Brooke. So it's important, Mike, to understand that these are just conceptual design ideas right now that we're considering. There has been no decision made on any improvements. It's only going to be a general list of recommendations made to town leadership. And in the event that town leadership chooses to move forward with looking into those more in-depthly, then there would be proper communication made to abutters. There'd be community conversations had. But I would encourage you, our communications team has put out a project site off of our town website specifically to this project. It has any information of work we've done so far and what our plan is moving forward, as well as our tentative schedule for this effort. As we kind of go through the steps of looking at the lot, surveying it, and start to have these conversations about what would make sense and what would not make sense.
There you go, Meg. Can you see that? Or if you're,
I can see it. Thank you for pulling that up. That's helpful. And yeah, and there's never really been, I tried to look back, like there's never really been any kind of hearing about this lot. and it kind of morphed from being used for National Grid to like a parking lot for probably up to 200 cars, maybe a little bit less, without a lot of input from neighbors, really, to be honest with you. And I do appreciate the need for it. I just feel that it would be helpful to understand, now I know the website to go to, but to have more information available to the public so we can just be informed and know what's going on in our neighborhood. So thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Matt, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just, we have, I would hope if there is lighting, it's dark sky compliant, because we've all voted for that. So that would be number one, whether we are required to do that as a town or not, we should set the right example and do that. Is number one. And number two, I think this lot has been a subject of, select board meetings and other meetings for quite a while now. It was, originally proposed, 6-7 years ago, to get a place for some of the trucks that were parking downtown, sort of long-term, a place to move. And, and that was successful and worked. It's morphing into a little more than that. But I think, we have, maybe we could do it a little better somehow, but we've had this here quite a bit, so.
So I'm going to suggest, Kevin, when you get to the point of proposing improvements to the lot, that maybe we schedule it as an agenda item so that the public watching the select board meetings can hear it in a little more detail.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Okay. Not seeing anything else. Let's move on to waste management, some trash talk, call it. Libby.
Okay, so our team here tonight for review of this item is our solid waste consultant, George Aronson, our finance director, Brian Turbot. I believe town council is online, John Giorgio. We have Howard Matz here, our capital program committee member. I think our solid waste manager, Chris Lowe, is online. And Chair Moore, of course, you have been involved as well. And we are ready to review with the board some of an overview of the terms and conditions that we're working towards in the waste services agreement with our solid waste facility operator, Waste Options, which was the only responder despite several inquiries to the RFP that we issued last year. And we know that there were some concerns earlier about what the differences are between the current contract and what the new contract will contain. And we would like to provide an overview of that tonight for the board. And hopefully, or maybe this gives the opportunity for any public input or feedback over the next couple of weeks. And hopefully we would present final documents to the board at the end of the month. So I think, Chair Moore, you were going to maybe give a little other additional overview.
Yeah, I just, we had a prep meeting this morning, and I tried to find a way to summarize. We're going to get into a lot of details in the presentation, but I would say overall, the goal of this, and I've been working on this for a couple of years almost now, it feels like, it started with, discussions about waste streams and technologies and sort of a broader level discussion about how we manage waste on Nantucket. And then we got to the nitty gritty of putting together a request for proposals and that procurement process. And we have a great team, really skilled and experienced team. But overall, I would say that the agreement we've been operating under or living with for more than 2 decades now was basically created based on the fact that the operator owned that the operator built and owned facilities out there. And there were some vagaries to that relationship and that contract that left a lot of questions and a lack of transparency around cost of things, pricing, how waste streams were managed. And so there was just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of a lack of transparency. And I would say the overarching goal of this group in the last many months of getting to the place we're at now was to build control back, or bring control back to the town, and to increase transparency so the community knows what we're paying for, how we're paying for it, what it costs, and also that we have the opportunity to control costs in ways that we did not have before because it is under our control. And so with that said, I'm going to turn it over to George to kind of get into more details of why this is better, how this is better, and what it's going to look like going forward. So go ahead, George.
Okay, thanks, Brooke. And Erica, if you could rewind the PowerPoint presentation, that might make things a little bit easier, back to its beginning. I assume the board remembers back in January, the select board voted to award the contract at the end of the evaluation process to Waste Options, subject to successful negotiation of the waste services agreement and the asset purchase and sale agreement. We've now gone through a negotiation process. We are not 100% complete of the language in those contracts, but we're very, very close to that. And so we're at a point where we're comfortable presenting what we have to the board, knowing that there will be some slight things to close out between now and when the board would vote at the end of April. So just basically recapping what we're talking about, the 4 facilities at the major facilities at the site, 2 of them, the composting facility and the transfer station, are now owned by Waste Options, and the material recovery facility for recycling and the landfill is owned by the town. The goal was to have the town own all facilities in the next generation of service, which would start on December 1st, 2025. So there are 2 agreements. One's the purchase and sale to buy the composting facility and the transfer station, and the other is the waste services agreement for the services that the Waste Options will deliver going forward. So I'll just take one at a time very briefly. I'll do it at a high level, and then if there are questions, we have tonight, and we also have time until the next meeting to ask more detailed inquiries should they arise. So let's go to the next slide. What's included in the asset purchase agreement? There's a picture of the transfer station and the composter. When you define what's being bought, we went to great detail to say not only the facilities, but what fixed equipment is included in them: supplies, tools, materials, inventory, assets. There's a license for the Bedminster technology the town would need as owner. There are warranties on, for example, the transfer station roof that need to be transferred. All that goes in great detail, and we have an exhibit setting out exactly what the town would be buying. Next slide, please. Purchase prices are the same as they were when this came before town meeting in 2024 Article 19. $1 million for the composting facility, which was back from amendment number 1 to the waste services agreement in 1997. So this is almost more than 20-year-old option that the town is exercising. The transfer station was based on a fair market appraisal. There was no preset price. The number is well below what it would cost to replace the building. It is and I'm going to talk about in a second, but those are the prices we're talking about. Next slide. Again, just to remind, the composting facility entered operation in 2003. So the option was actually negotiated before the composting facility was built. And that's how far back this goes. The transfer station, some of you remember, had a major fire in 2013, was reconstructed. So the new structure is a little bit more than 11 years old, and it's still got a lot of life left in it. So it's not only the facilities, but the condition that's important in any agreement, and there are provisions both that Waste Options needs to continue its maintenance under the existing agreement through the date of purchase. The town has inspection rights, which we are recommending. This process has gone well, I think, at the staff level between the solid waste manager and Waste Options site manager, looking at the condition of the assets. There are a number of things that are delineated on a list of maintenance and replacement tasks for Waste Options to complete prior to the purchase date. And this has gone well. And the important thing is to make sure that the facilities are in working order. We know these are old facilities, so there will be new or additional work done, but they also have to be in working order, and the town has to know what it's taking over. So I think those are the basic terms of the asset purchase and sale agreement. The things that are remaining are some minor issues in terms of the language on the transfer. So let me go to the waste services agreement, because this is actually a much more complicated agreement. Next slide, please. Again, just reviewing the process by which we got here. If issued the RFP in June, we were hopeful we would get more bids than we did. We got one proposal. We spent a lot of time evaluating it. January was the award date, and we've been working since January to get to the point where we are now, and just to being very close to completion of the agreement. Next slide. How is this agreement that we're working on different from the existing contract? And I'm taking a high-level view at some of the important differences. I think if you look at the scope of services from the existing contract, which was originally drafted in 1996, before there was a composting facility, before there was a transfer station, and when the landfill was used in a very different way, it's not surprising there was no detailed scope of services. There were some generalized contract provisions, and that agreement was never really amended so that there was full transparency in terms of what service was being provided and what price was being paid for what service. That's what the new water services agreement does very explicitly. We've got 8 defined service areas. We'll list them on in the presentation a little bit. We're looking at fixed fees, per unit fees, pass-through costs, and revenue sharing for each of those 8 areas matched to the service. The point is that with a solid baseline, we know that solid waste management changes, and now we have a baseline. If there's a change, we know we're changing from. We know what is being paid for what service. If the service is changed, we know how to do that and to start from the baseline and go where we need to go. So I think it's a new level of transparency and detail that we've never had with this contract. Next slide, please. I think the ownership was mentioned. The town will own all facilities on the site. That's a big difference. It means the town will set tip fees at the transfer station or for the other waste streams and keep the tip fee revenue. The town has control over where the waste is delivered. If it's going to the mainland, it will work, of course, closely with its operator on that. And the town will take a new role in both engineering and permitting in terms of oversight of the facilities that the town owns. It's important to realize that being an owner, the town has some new responsibilities. On the other hand, it's part of the price of having control over the fate of those facilities going forward. Next slide, please. Okay, and again, capital projects, the town will control as the owner, both the capital projects or changes. And if there are modifications or upgrades of the existing facilities, those are town decisions. And that may include future incorporation or use of new waste processing technologies. That was hard to do under the existing contract just because of a number of factors and various outside approvals, et cetera. With the town as the owner, the town has control of those decisions.
George, I'm going to interrupt you. Matt has a quick question.
Yeah, on that topic, George, quick question.
Yeah.
Is the facility currently fully up to code, state standards, et cetera, or are we going to have a lot of things due right away?
I mean, the inspections that we've seen is that it's up to code, the facilities themselves that the town is buying. There are some questions about operations which we're addressing, and I think we're going through a process this year. I think I mentioned a punch list basically of issues to take care of. My understanding is that the facilities, that there will be no major or no issue in terms of getting the facilities up to code as a change going forward. There may be things we find, but we've been looking for a while and we know where we are.
Matt, were you talking about DEP compliance more than the
Or
facilities?
just any surprises, like if all of a sudden we're responsible for something, say you're buying my bakery and it's, and it's not up to code, and the person has to change it, that would, are we buying something that we can operate like this for 5 or 10 years, or are we buying something that is immediately going to need a lot of work? That's my question.
No, our understanding is, well, they are older facilities, so there will be maintenance going forward and there will be some refurbishments coming. But in terms of it's in working order, and that means that it's meeting code so that we can operate it today. There are, and I think another issue here is in terms of what Rick mentioned, the compliance with the DEP regulations. There are some issues with the site that need to be addressed through operational means. And over time, there are certain things that were set literally in 1996 that need to be updated with DEP. So there's an ongoing conversation. I think that's under control. And I think we know what the issues are and how to address them. So I'm not saying there can never be surprises, because there can always be surprises, but we've been in and out of this facility at a new level since the decision is made. And we have a better understanding of both the physical environments and what's required to operate it, what's required to maintain it. And so this is what we're doing, and we're getting up to speed.
Okay, that's good.
Well, okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is the list of the 8 service areas, and I thought it was important. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. There's time between now and later in the month if we want to go into detail. We have a proposal from Waste Options on a scope of work for every single one of these areas. And just the composter, the biosolids, which is really a separate issue, even though it's being handled at the composter. There are reasons why that might change over time. The yard waste and other feedstocks for compost, mulch, and soil products, which are handled outside. The landfill and the general site, which right now landfill capacity is being used for what I call hard to ship process residuals. Some materials like C&D waste go off to the mainland, but if it's difficult, we're saving the landfill space, which is scarce for the things that are hardest or most expensive to dispose of on the mainland. The MRF and the Citizens Drop-Off Center, which is its own operation. The transfer station, which is a very versatile building, and that's getting a lot of use. What I'm calling hard to manage waste handling, which is, some people call them hard to manage or orphan waste, things like tires or screens or mattresses. Every single one of these materials or waste streams has its own way and needs to be managed separately. Some of them are in bunkers outside. Some of them need some level of processing, but it's a whole category of individual waste streams that need special attention, and there are reasons to look at them as basically an operation center. And then finally, the scale house. So we have 8 service areas. We've got scopes of work for all 8. Next slide, please. And again, I'm not going to go over this. This is the level of detail. We have about, I think it's 14 sections to every single scope for each area. So we have a lot of detail on how the facility and how each service would be provided, how each facility would be operated, and as well as delineating services to be performed by the town or that the town has the right to control just as the owner, to make sure that the town controls and oversees the use and capital projects, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, again, this is a high-level slide for the 8 service areas. There are fixed fees when we can get them. Hard to manage waste is per unit. There are variable fees, which takes care of or is meant to address monthly variations so that the fee is a little higher in the summer when the peak quantities come in than it would be in the winter when things are less active. And then there are pass-through costs. If it's going off island, I'm paying a tip fee. If there's a capital project, certain major maintenance and replacement projects, these are going to be pass-through costs to the owner. And then in terms of the landfill, we got some prices on landfill projects that we might use going forward. And scale house, there's a definition of overtime, what counts as overtime at the scale house, and when the town requests it. There's also revenue sharing. When we talk about revenue sharing, we're talking about revenue from products should they receive a positive price after all the process costs and transportation, such as recyclables, which generally, especially during the summer, have had positive prices. Not always. There have been times when recycling materials have had negative prices, but if they're positive, they are shared. And that's true for recycling, not only from the MRF, but materials picked out of the transfer station or the other centers. On the other hand, the tip fees are going to stay with the town. Next slide, please. I mean, there's a lot covered here, and I'll just run down some of the points or let you see them. Again, it's a basic obligation per waste option to perform services for service fees. They're defined in detail. 10-year term to start, 3 5-year extensions by the town. We've spent a lot of time on prevailing wage compliance, insurance. There will be a performance bond, which we didn't have under the last contract. We have a schedule of liquidated damages for waste options non-performance. If waste options is not performing in certain areas, it makes no sense to, call it a fault and threaten termination of the contract to enforce something that's at a much lower level. So we actually have a schedule of items that have been issues in the past that we can go after liquidated damages without threatening to go through a default or termination scenario. You're seeing this in more contracts these days in the solid waste business. It just is a better way to manage that sort of situation. And finally, default, termination provisions, allowances for uncontrollable circumstances. So it's a significant and complicated contract. I will say, and perhaps I skipped this, but one of the biggest differences between this contract and the prior contract is this one, the first version was drafted by town council and put in the RFP for response. So we're dealing off a town template of what we're looking for in terms of a contract. Next slide, please. I guess this is, taking a step back. With town control, the town will have opportunities to implement changes that might have been more difficult under the previous structure. We've talked about the tip fees for incoming waste streams, incentivizing waste reduction. We can go back to see if we can implement that in a way that saves money for the town. We're looking already at alternatives to the commercial ferry, handling C&D waste separately from NERNIX and from residuals, because there are regulatory distinctions in DEP rules. And if we can comply with those distinctions, there are some opportunities to get lower costs and lower tip fees. We've been looking for some time how to collect and manage food and organic waste separately. It may require reconfiguring the composter to reduce operating costs. A lot easier to do if the town is the owner and can proceed at its initiative to pursue any savings or better way of managing solid waste. MU is mixed excavation waste. There was a lot of that material on the island coming to 188 Matticat Road, and there's some other thoughts about how it might be managed. And finally, we're hoping at some point to bring in commercially proven emerging technologies. There are people out there who are beginning to process plastic film, for example. There may be other ways. Anything that can be processed on the site and doesn't need to be shipped off-site or take up landfill space is worth looking at and considering, assuming it's commercially proven. So I think that's the set of opportunities that having the control that the town would have in a new contract would offer in terms of the next generation of waste management and how we might change it, update it, take advantage of emerging technology and move forward. So that's the high view. Next slide, please. Said it's a high view. There's the transfer station from above and a view of the site. I can imagine there are a lot of details and a lot of questions. If you want to ask now, or if you want to take time after tonight, we'll be responsive to whatever the will is of the board. And thank you for the time.
It's Matt. Controlling the composter is a good thing. We had a broken composter a number of years ago. In those 2 or 3 months, we saved, a ton of money, 400,000, it was a lot because it wasn't running, and that made me realize how much the electricity is to operate that. So if we can find a way to, to control that and control those electrical costs in some manner, that would be amazing. The other question I had, just thinking about it, is do we have, I'm assuming that you guys have done projected P&Ls and, you know how much is Waste Options making the same or more? How much more? And how are we projecting over the next, 5, 10 years? Is that the subsidies we've been paying going to be sufficient? Is this going to be more expensive, less expensive? Do you guys have that to share?
Okay, so I think probably, let me take the second one first. I think the best thing to look at is we've already gone through the exercise of putting together a fiscal year 2026 budget. And so that's going to be a hybrid year. So we've got 5 months under the old system and 7 months under the new system. Okay, so we were, in doing that budget, we had to look item by item and service area by service area. I mean, overall, costs are going up. The town will be keeping tip fees, which will offset some of those increases. And there's a balance there of how you do that, which I think the fiscal year 26 budget is an example of. And I think, and the fact is that by taking control comes at a price, but we look at it as an investment in being able to make some of the changes over the longer term that we couldn't have made under the previous contract. So is there a way to, for example, run the composter over the summer and maybe shut it off during the winter and save electricity that way? Is there a way to use the aeration base differently? I don't want to get into too much details, but we do have opportunities to do that. But, in terms of, if I think, given the bids that came back, the prices, they're higher than they were before. On the other hand, if the tip fees go to the town, you can offset a good chunk of the increase in a way that's manageable. And I know that was the exercise we went through with the fiscal year 26 budget. So I don't know if I answered your question or give you a sense of it. I think the question of how much is Waste Options really making on an operating contract, they're going to be making less money than if they're seeking a return on their capital. We would have hoped to have more competition in the bidding than we did. On the other hand, we did it, put out the RFP and had sufficient, I'll say, interest in competition to have some value in what I would say making Waste Options submit a reasonably competitive bid. So when we looked at the numbers, they, maybe they were a little higher than we wished they were, but that's always the case. But they were not out of line with some level of expectation, given the situation and what they might have been in a different scenario. So maybe that's a lot of words. I hope I've answered most of your question.
Yeah.
We got
and Matt,
you kind of.
I suspect that the way to do this, I know that in the packet, there's a line item by line item comparison, color coded of the old waste services agreement and the new waste services agreement. We've done also that with the for the 26 budget. My suggestion is we're probably going to make some sense to spend a little more time offline to go through some of those items to get you to the comfort level you need.
All right, that would be great. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions at this point? Okay, so just for the public's benefit, we will be reviewing and authorizing the agreements at our April 30th meeting. So if anyone has any questions in the meantime that are prompted by this, please send them along to, I guess, Chris, Libby, you think?
I think they could go to Chris, sure, and Chris could share them with the group.
Yep. It's Chris Lowe, who's the solid waste manager, and his contact information is available on the website, town website. He can filter questions, and if the public has any in preparation for our adopting these agreements at our April 30th meeting. So, or deciding whether to adopt them, I guess I should say. Okay, so thanks for that. And then up next is Select Board Reports and Comments, a review of potential draft comment letter. And this is regarding the offshore freshwater drilling process. John, do you want to just walk us through that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Yes, so the town had found out through various media outlets that the National Science Foundation was sponsoring a project to do some drilling on the coast south of Nantucket, basically drilling down into the seabed to determine the presence of fresh water, potentially, under the seabed, and to gather some information based upon that drilling process on the nature of the freshwater lens and whether it was renewable. And so they have funded this project, which is being conducted by scientists from UMass, the UK, and also the University of Colorado Bureau of Mines. As we understand it, well, there's an environmental assessment that was prepared for this project, which is an assessment of the environmental impacts. And it was determined by the National Science Foundation that the impacts to the environment were not significant, and therefore a full-blown environmental impact report was not or impact statement was not required under the National Environmental Policy Act, but that an environmental assessment was appropriate in order to inform the public and the regulators of the potential impacts to this project. So we were asked last week to take a look at the environmental assessment right after the town learned about this project, and we prepared a proposed comment letter for the board's consideration tonight. And I believe it's in your packet. I don't know whether, Erica, you could put up that draft comment letter. We don't really have any information at this point thank you, to warrant the recommending that the town oppose this project. However, we do feel that it's important that the National Science Foundation and their partners continue to consult with the town, or I should say, initiate consultation with the town, and also to keep the town informed of how this project is going to progress. They want to start this project, I believe, on May 1st, and it will last, I believe, for about 90 days. So it's obviously through the summer months. And if you'll scroll all the way down to the bottom, Erica, we're basically asking that this is called proposed Exhibition 501. We want them to conduct an analysis of any potential impact on the water quality, water resources, or environment of Nantucket. They've essentially already done that, and it's reported in the environmental assessment, which I believe is in your packet. We did think, however, given that there was public comment about this and concerns and basically a lack of information, we thought it was important to ask that a representative from the proposed expedition attend a meeting of the select board and basically do a public presentation and be available to answer any questions. So we're making that request in bullet number 2 in this letter. And then we want to avoid, obviously, any repeat of what happened with the blade failure. We're certainly not suggesting this is of the same magnitude or scale, but certainly if there are any issues that come up during the course of this drilling project, that the town be notified and in a timely manner. And then finally, and then finally, we're requesting that they engage in the required consultation with the town pursuant to Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. So this is the approach that we are recommending to the town at this point, to file this comment letter. I believe it's due on April 11th. And if we get the board's approval tonight, we will file this comment letter tomorrow. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions from the board? And then also, we have Mark Willett here, so I'll ask legal questions, and then Mark's also available. Anybody?
Madam Chair, yeah, I would say that reading over the letter, that John and Devin provide a lot of background on what the legal standards are through NEPA, CZM, and Section 106 of the NHPA. And those are things that fall in the purview of being notified, at least for the town and county of Nantucket. And it seems like this is a prudent use of sending the letter so that we are notified and kept informed on any projects that may affect Nantucket and its waters.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm looking at the letter. I think the letter's, well, first off, we received another letter. We received an email today, and some of the things in the email, one was that they're potentially looking for rare earth metals was in the letter. I'm not sure if that's true or not true, et cetera. So if any of those should be added, if any of that concern should be added, I would ask that those be added. I do wonder, can we ask them to sort of guarantee that this isn't going to impact us, indemnify us if this is going to impact us, not do it if it's going to impact us. It's one thing to have them come and tell us everything's going to be wonderful, but if some of the concerns that citizens have, like Mary Chalk has, and others, come to fruition, and our waters are muddy all July and August, from this, we will have another serious situation on our hands. And so I know we don't have the ability to stop this, but do we have the ability to ask that they guarantee they aren't going to impact us? And if they do, they'll take care of it. I think we should strengthen a little bit to that level because of the experience we've just had.
Is that John, for John?
That's a John.
Yeah.
Can we do that in this letter, John?
We can certainly add some language to the letter. Matt, you talk about potentially having them indemnify us or provide guarantees. I don't think that's going to get us where we want to be. I don't think that would be something that they could really commit to, and I don't think they would commit to that. But I do think that we want to know if there are any representations that they've made in both the email we got today as well as the environmental assessment itself, that the town be immediately notified, and that they take measures to essentially address those adverse impacts. But you're right, we don't really have a lot of control over this given the location. I think what we want to have is a robust reporting, and that measures be undertaken, as I said, to address any unanticipated adverse impacts should they occur. And then
Go ahead.
and then we would take that information and see what we could do with it in terms of good luck, but getting the regulators to step in as well.
Malcolm?
Yeah, I don't think we can ask for guarantees, but I think the key is communication. I would love for a representative to come and speak to us and have to deal with the questions from the citizens. But I think John expressed it well. We need better communication. We need some, just guarantee that if there are issues, we're going to hear about it.
Right.
And not hear about it in a timely manner.
John, Mary Chalk spoke in public comment. It prompted a thought about, do we have any understanding that they have not complied with their regulatory requirements in terms of getting our input and notifying us that this was happening? I just find it odd that there was zero communication to the town about this project. And did they have any obligation under the permitting process that you're aware of that they did not comply with?
Well, I think that's a complicated question, Brooke, to answer. And I would prefer not to go on record one way or the other on this call. I think the issue is, what is the extent of their obligation to consult with the town? And, we clearly, we haven't been consulted. We weren't even notified of this project until we heard about it in the press, as I said. So it may be, I don't know if they've complied with all of the requirements. This has been happening so quickly. I do think it is for that reason that we want to have somebody from the expedition, even Zoom into a meeting with the select board, and we can ask them those questions directly.
Okay. And Mary had also asked, is there leave to ask that the comment period be extended in this request? And because we didn't get notified. I guess it's sort of like this spiral of, you don't know about something and then the window to comment on it is so tight for the community.
So I think requesting an extension at this point in time, regardless of how we got to this point, Madam Chair, is probably not going to achieve the desired result. I mean, I'm just being honest here. I do think we want to go on record, send this comment letter in, request somebody to come. Mary and others can ask their questions at a public meeting. Are they obligated to come and talk to us? Probably not. But hopefully they will be able to set something up that would allow that to happen, even if it's on a Zoom call.
Okay, thanks, John. Tom?
John, are you aware of that the Vineyard or Dukes County, the 6 towns in the Vineyard or Dukes County have been got notified of this, and if they are sending a comparable letter at all?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question, Tom. I do know that that Senator Sears' office has been involved and has communicated with the town and has asked some questions as well. I don't know the extent to which the Martha's Vineyard towns have been involved.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, we just need a motion to authorize town council to send this letter.
And I will, Madam Chair, and I will take heed of what Malcolm and Matt were saying, and we will beef the letter up a bit in terms of immediately communicating with the town should any of their representations prove not to be accurate, or if there are any unanticipated issues with the project.
Okay, so I guess the motion would be to revise and send the letter.
Yes. Madam Chair, I move that we revise and send as outlined by our town council.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Tom, did you want to comment before we vote? Okay, by roll call, Malcolm,
Aye.
Dawn,
Aye.
Matt,
I'm not sure. Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay. Thank you for the work on that, John and Devon. Okay, committee reports. I have one thing to say that I forgot to say in select board comments, and that is that I was notified by the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement late afternoon today, which has become a common practice on Wednesday afternoons, that the blades on turbine 8 AW38 are scheduled to be removed tomorrow by Vineyard Wind. So that includes the broken blade and the 2 remaining blades on the turbine that had the blade failure. And we've been pressuring Bessie to get that done, especially following the lightning strike. So that is happening tomorrow. Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
By roll call, Matt?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you, everyone who's out there listening. Have a good evening.